Agenda here, Black Bear Management Update. You're up again, Larry.
Okay, on the black bears, our black bear expert is Carl Lackey, and he's been updating me on the black bear situation. And from what I understand, I think the last time maybe this was on the agenda, it was we were talking about where we were going with black bear studies out there. And Carl told me that for the last 12 years, he's been working with Wildlife Conservation Society, John Beckman, who got a PhD at UNR studying urban bears. So this group has funded a lot of the research we've been doing on bears, and they work in collaboration with Carl. And he indicated that we were trying to follow up bears that were more wildland bears rather than the urban bears, and try to get a feel for the two populations. And so we radio collared bears that were in wildland areas. And what he told me is that the radios they bought, 5 out of 5 of them failed, so they had problems with them. And then 2 of those were replaced, and then he collared 2 additional females, giving us a total of 4 good collars, and he wants to replace 3 more of those, especially if he can find those original bears. So Carl's trying to do that. He also indicated that he will hopefully be putting out 6 more collars this summer and fall, and that would give us a total of 10, which was the initial goal apparently. We've got 5 bears collared in the Carson range. 3 of those are good and 2 need to be replaced. 1 collared bear is in the Pine Nuts, and that one's working fine, and there's another one in Desert Creek, but that one needs to be replaced. So we're working on trying to do that right now, and hope to continue to follow these bears up. And he said some of the preliminary information indicates that he's seeing some movement back and forth of these bears from the wildland to the urban situation. So there's a little bit of mix going on there. And that's about all he mentioned, I think. So I guess if there's...
Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Howell?
Mr. Gilbertson, when are we going to be ready for a season?
I guess we're always ready for a season.
Let's have one.
So it just depends on how ready everybody is. Obviously it'll be a real challenge for us to go down that road, and that's part of the reason we're doing this work, to have as many answers as we can to the questions that are going to come up. But
That's interesting. They're going from urban to wild, so
yeah,
if you take the ones that hunt in the wild, you might help the urban problem.
it's all a possibility, you bet.
Commissioner Rain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I brought this up before, as far as almost 3 years ago. This was brought up about, why not have a black bear hunt? And at that point, I think the discussion was basically we needed to have a little better idea of what the population is, so we come up with a quota. What have we come up with on that population estimate? Or have we have any further modeling at this point of the population?
Well, Carl has been working on that, and he's even been working with some of the statisticians and stuff at UNR, and we also have a lot of marked animals out there over the years when we captured and released and moved animals, and so we can kind of do a mark recapture study, and there's also models to work on. Basically, right now, the best estimate we have is similar to the one when we put out the bear bulletin. I believe back then we were talking around 300 bears, and the estimate that we have currently is in the 200 to 400 range. It looks like we have that many bears.
So with that, is that deemed to be a sufficient population to have a limited bear hunt, half dozen tag? Limited. Because my understanding was, speaking with predecessor in your position, a couple people back, was that basically one of the best reasons to have a hunt would be get some better harvest data which would be the most useful thing. And his concern at the time was just wanting to get call it the perfect quota for the bears, but rather than call it a optimal quota, we just start at a very low number and try to get some of that harvest data so that, we can find out where we're at for the population. Is that a reasonable option, do you think, for the coming year or two?
Yeah, we can definitely look into all of those things, and the other information that Carl provided for me was that since 1997, we've documented 268 bears that we've lost or had to kill or died or got hit on the roads or, various causes of death. And out of those 263 were killed or by, accidents, by road kills, or we had to remove because they were problem bears or whatever it was. And if you look at the numbers, it comes out to about 19 bears a year on the average. So I guess essentially we've removed about 19 bears a year on the average. And so I guess the questions we want to be able to answer is, well, if we implement a hunting program, would that be additive or compensatory type losses and that kinds of things? So if we can feel comfortable about those kinds of answers, that should help us to justify or not a season based on that type of biology.
Is there a timeline for that? I mean, 2 years, 10 years, 6 months?
Well, since we're putting the collars out this summer and we'd like to follow them through the winter and look at survival and then document, the other thing we're trying to document is actual production in the wildland bears, so that we don't have to argue that the only bears we're getting are bears that move in from California, that we're actually producing our own. It would be nice to at least collect that data get those collars on this summer and be able to follow those bears till spring anyway and see what they produce next summer. And by then we should at least have pretty good information on what kind of production we have within the state. So that would be ideal, I guess,
Next summer.
to collect that information.
Other questions? Commissioner Cabot?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Larry, you may or may not be up on this, but I talked with Ken, it's probably been last fall, about how the bear complaints are being reported, and he indicated that you were going to put in place a system where any employee that got a call would fill out a standardized form so that it wouldn't just be law enforcement taking a call and going and taking care of it and not having any cohesiveness within the department on what's going on. Is that in place now, or are we still working on that, or what's the?
We're really close to that right now. We've got some forms built. We've even got some coding for our employees to report dangerous wildlife calls versus non-dangerous, and we're putting that process into place right now. We're almost there, I think. Right?
Yeah, for the record, again, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. History-wise, the majority of calls, whether they come into dispatch or are routed to our dispatch via sheriff's office through 911 or our own employees, when they receive a call, oh, you got a bear in your yard, let me, connect you to dispatch, they track those calls. Where we lose a little bit of the integrity is a phone call comes to one of the folks at our front counters and, hey, I got a bear that I saw wander through the neighborhood. Okay, is it still there? No, it's gone. This was last week. I just thought I'd call and tell you about it. Those type of things have slipped through the cracks. So we've got a system in place. We divide it into, as Larry said, dangerous and non-dangerous wildlife. Dangerous wildlife being bears, mountain lions, venomous snakes as our dangerous wildlife. And that's just for the sake, not to say that every bear is dangerous, every mountain lion is dangerous, but we needed some delineation for consistency. And then the non-dangerous wildlife. So all that is virtually in place. The memo's been drafted out to send to all department employees, and Ken's reviewing that right now. So that's where we're at.
Let's take 5 minutes.
Let's take a 5-minute break.